Welcome to my next What's the Deal with video. In this episode, I'll be taking a look at something that has been bugging me for a while. I noticed the issue shortly after the release of the first two codices, Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines. Having these codices for over a year at this point, it is nearly universally agreed upon that Codex Space Marines is in a poor state, with some individuals claiming that the whole codex needs to be redone. And you know, I don't 100% disagree, but I find it fascinating that Codex Chaos Space Marines, which came out immediately after, seems to have aged just fine. So let's figure out what's the deal with the Astartes disparity. So, it's no secret that Codex Chaos Space Marines has aged far better than their loyalist brethren. I mean, you still see the codex being used to create tournament-worthy lists. The usual thing I hear on the issue is that the Space Marines codex is just a victim of codex creep. For those who don't know, it's the concept that since Codex Space Marines was the first codex to be released, and each codex being released would be slightly stronger than the last, by the time we get to the present, 20 codices later, the Space Marines codex has basically become Krillin from Dragon Ball Z. A pretty cool dude, but he can't contend with the newer fighters. But I don't think this is the sole factor. If it were, Codex Chaos Space Marines should also be suffering from that same creep. I noticed this disparity between the two books shortly after their release last year, and over the course of 8th edition, those issues have just become more and more glaring. The issue is, Codex Space Marines is just a poorer quality codex, and the codex creep doesn't really help that problem. I find the comparison between the two codices interesting. Both books released in the same time frame, both books are about Space Marines, and yet Codex Chaos Space Marines is far healthier. And here's why. In 3 of the 6 key areas that comprises a codex, Codex Space Marines can contend against Chaos Space Marines, never mind the newer codices. These are stratagems, psychic powers, and units. Let's dive into these issues, and I'll explain exactly what I mean. Stratagems. I thought it'd be best to start with stratagems, since I'll be referencing throughout the other sections as well. I'm going to ignore the generic get more relic stratagems and the sub-faction specific stratagems, because those stratagems should not lock away the tactical needs of your faction. Rather, they should add alternate strategies or combos that would speak to the flavor of the sub-faction. So, let's take a look at the stratagem offerings available to each book. Here I've assembled both book stratagems into a table detailing their name, a paraphrased version of what they do, and their CP cost. The stratagems have also been arranged into an order where related or similar stratagems are in the same row to make it easier to reference my points. Now, I want to go through the stratagems, but to go through all 34 in this table might get a bit stale. Instead, I'll go through a few examples to illustrate my points. For those who want a better look at the table, I will leave a link in the description of this video. I'll be grading the stratagems into 4 tiers: pass, good, great, and powerful. To be good, the cost of the stratagem needs to be justifiable when compared against its demands or requirements for the gain you are getting. Now, all these factors are relative to each other, but you'll see what I mean, and I'll explain along the way. Let's begin. Hellfire Shells. Fire a heavy bolter, and if you hit, you do D3 mortal wounds. This is great, because if you use it on a Devastator Marine, he can add 1 to his hit rolls using the Sergeant Signum ability, and you can use the Devastator's Cherub to reload the Hellfire Shell. If you got a Captain nearby, you get a tasty 2d3 mortal wounds on a rerollable 2+, which is pretty great for 1 CP. The Heretic Astartes equivalent is Demon Shell, which instead works on bolt pistols, which has inferior range, but is more flexible as most characters will have bolt pistols. The catch is it prevents rerolls, and if you miss, you end up doing D3 mortal wounds to yourself. Overall, I give Demon Shell the rank of good, since if the situation presents itself, it can be useful, and asks very little in the form of its demands. Killshot. I give Killshot a rank of great. It requires 3 Predator tanks, which on average total up at 567 points. For 1 CP, you can add 1 to wound and damage rolls for all 3 tanks that target vehicles or monsters with all of its weapons. Now this is awesome. The only reason it didn't get the rank of powerful is that it demands quite a bit from your list. But as a means to deal with enemy mechs and monsters, it's fantastic. I give a slight edge to the Chaos Space Marines only due to the fact that they have other stratagems and psychic powers which help aid the effectiveness of this great stratagem. Data link telemetry. This one is a pass for me. Whirlwinds are okay, but usually not worth their points. Having them auto-hit for 1 CP is pretty good, but it requires you to also field land speeders, which to me are too expensive for what they are, and having the same toughness as bikes, they can be slain pretty easily, which will immediately remove this tactic from your playbook. Blasphemous Machines. This, on the other hand, is quite good. Since Astartes faction's vehicles do not benefit from their sub-factions rules, it's quite good to be able to prevent the movement-based hit penalties on your Chaos Space Marines vehicles. Useful when repositioning for that sweet kill shot. Masterful Marksmanship. This can be used to make a unit of Stern Guard veterans add 1 to wound rolls with their special issue bolt guns, which have the profile of Strength 4, AP-2, Damage 1. Adding 1 to wound rolls on a Strength 4 weapon can be quite handy, especially when it has good AP. The reason why I give it a pass, however, is because while it can make for a decent combo, it only works on the Stern Guard veterans and only works on their special issue bolt guns, making them better at destroying infantry. But there are superior units that do a better job of that task anyways, without the need of stratagems. Veterans of the Long War. Here it is, the first stratagem I would rank as powerful. It is mechanically identical to Masterful Marksmanship, but you can use it on any infantry or biker unit, on all of their weapons, in any phase, including combat. And it's still only 1 CP, powerful indeed. Next up, only in death does duty end. This one is pretty fantastic, allowing a slain character to fight or shoot as if it were that phase. The only catch is, this is for 2 CP, which isn't exactly cheap, and most characters don't bring the volume to damage ratio you would like for its cost, Rebute Gilliman being the exception. If you're using this on him, I'd give it the rank of powerful. For everyone else, it's great. Tide of Traitors. Powerful. For 2 CP, once for battle, you can remove a unit of Chaos Cultists and outflank them at full strength. When you consider the tactical power of relocating a Troop's Choice unit to a critical position combined with restoring that unit, potentially 39 cultists, this is extremely powerful. It wasn't always a once per game stratagem, but it was so powerful that it got FAQ'd, and now it is. Endless Cacophony. Powerful. So powerful. For 2 CP, an infantry or biker unit marked with Slaanesh can shoot a second time in the shooting phase. This shouldn't need much explaining. You pay 2 CP and you literally double a unit's effectiveness in the shooting phase. Empiric Channeling. This is another pass for me. It requires a librarian to be within 6 inches of 2 other librarians. For 1 CP, you can cast an additional power and add 2 to the psychic test. Sure, 1 CP is cheap, but HQs are a valuable force org slot, and with Marines being so elite, you are incentivized to take a captain and lieutenant to get more reliability from your units. Compare that to the Great Sorcerer. This I'd say is good. For 1 CP, a Psyker marked as Tzeentch can manifest 1 additional power. What's interesting for all these marked stratagems is that there's often a clear best choice for each unit. And for a Chaos Sorcerer, why wouldn't you mark it as Tzeentch anyways? Tactical Flexibility. Pay 1 CP to split up a unit of 10 models with a combat squad ability into 2 units of 5. This is another pass. If you are taking a battalion detachment, which you should be, you will have at least 3 troop choices anyways. It would only be useful in the rare circumstance that you need to split up your squad to take 2 separate objectives. Just hope that if that situation presents itself, your unit hasn't lost any of its models. And Chaos Familiar. It's good. Pay 1 CP to allow a Psyker to replace one of its psychic powers with a different one. It's ironic because this stratagem offers more tactical flexibility than a tactical flexibility stratagem does, allowing you to adjust your powers over the course of the game, providing you tactical options which would otherwise be locked out once the game has commenced. Well, we went through all the stratagems, and I think you have probably agreed with my feelings on most of them as well. So let's review. On the Loyalist side, of the 18 stratagems, we have 6 passes, 7 which are good, 5 which are great, and 0 which have earned the rank of powerful. On the Heretic side, of the 16 stratagems available, we have 0 passes, 11 which are good, 2 which are great, and 3 which are powerful. There is definitely a quantity versus quality disparity here, with the Heretic Astartes having more stratagems which are good, and of the ones that are better than good, more than half are powerful. It honestly surprised me when I realized that I gave 0 passes to the Heretic stratagems, as I tried to be as objective as possible. But what may be a contributing factor, and worthy of note, is the sheer amount of stratagems that are unit dependent for the Loyalists. So, in addition to the stratagems available to the Space Marines being worse overall, having so many dependent on specific units means you have less adaptable tactical plays available over the course of a game. Alright, solution segment. The problem is pretty clear. Too many of the Loyalist stratagems are tied to specific units, and none of them are truly powerful. Here are a few simple ideas for the lackluster stratagems. One of my favorite parts of 40k is that the factions are different and unique, but here is one place I would ask for a little mirroring. Veterans of the Long War. Who are the heretics at war with? Obviously the Loyalist Marines. So why then are there only veterans on one side? Jokes aside, you see where I'm going with this. The Loyalist Marines should probably have an equivalent to the stratagem. And narratively, It makes sense that cultists, scouts, and Primaris Marines should not be able to leverage the experience that comes with fighting wars for 10,000 years. Auspex Scan. Honestly, when you consider that the Craft World's version of this is the same cost, situationally superior with better range, and doesn't have a -1 to hit rolls, this should really be 1 CP. Do that, and now it's a great stratagem. Why not allow tactical flexibility to allow units with the same datasheet to group up, as long as they don't exceed their max unit size? I mean, it's flexibility, so it should go both ways. Empiric Channeling. Make it 2 CP and only require 2 Psychers, but the buff should give 2 to their Psychic tests and deny the Witch tests, and increase the range of those tests by 6 inches. This would actually give a pretty justifiable purpose to take Librarians, because outside of Chief Tigurius, nobody's fielding Space Marine Psychers. And it makes sense to me. Look, Librarians are all about controlled and precise use of warp energy, so it makes sense that the Heretics should have more powerful abilities, but the Astartes should have measures to contain and suppress those powers. Currently, the Psychic Hood ability Librarians have barely helps in that regard, because it only works when enemy Psychers are within 12 inches. Also, why isn't there a stratagem for Primaris Marines? It's a whole model line that has no universal stratagems. I mean, even Demon Engines have one stratagem. The Primaris were delivered to chapters across the galaxy by Rebute Gilliman himself during the Indomitus Crusade. They are supposed to represent a bit of hope in this grim dark galaxy, and I think they should have a stratagem. Well, that wraps up part 1 on the Astartes disparity. In part 2, we'll take a look at the other 2 key areas, in the case of Codex Space Marines versus Codex Chaos Space Marines. As per usual, let me know if you guys enjoy this kind of content. It takes a ton of work to do the research, script, revise, record, and then edit these videos, so any feedback would be greatly appreciated. Also, if I missed anything or if you feel I'm incorrect in any areas, let me know, as I'm always happy to hear other perspectives or areas to further my own understanding. Alrighty, off to work on part 2. So until next time, happy wargaming.